Good evening. Um, yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of an update. Um, I just got sunburned. I was at the Renaissance Fair longer than I thought I would be. So, I don't know. I left before I got sun poisoning, and then I put on sunscreen and went out shopping a little. But, whew, yeah. um, this is my second sunburn of the year. So neither one was pleasant, but I'll be sure to put on sunscreen before work tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be indoors, but should help. Um, yeah, I just wanted to sort of talk about something. It comes up every election, every national election cycle. There's an ebb in talks about politics. Um, Well, I don't urge people to be fatalistic, um, but there's a lot of time that can be spent doing other things than talking about headlines. Basically, if it entertains you, that's one thing, but it's like um, I've heard people basically talk about the merits of of the politicians or lack thereof, the character, basically. But people don't vote based off character. They vote based off of self interest. So it doesn't matter how bad the crime is, really. If they think the politician has the best chance of helping them, they'll vote for that politician. And you can get on a whole list of issues, but that people may feel one way or another about. But surveys are deceiving because they're usually not randomized and people lie on them. Because each time you do a survey, it needs to be an affirmative choice to fill out the survey. It means someone's taking their time. That means that somebody cares. Apathy is the enemy of objectivity and a lot of other things too. Yeah, apathy is the great enemy of humanity, if one looks at it in a philosophical context. Um, anyways, the other thing is people aren't going to persuade other people to vote differently for the most part. There's a few outliers, but it's mostly, as I said, it's baked in, it's self interest, and that's all there is to it. Now, the list of priorities are usually are perceived as affecting someone's life for the better, and whatever prejudices they may harbor. So it's basically, how does this help me? And how does this hurt the right people? That's a phrase I heard years ago. It was talking about um, I think it was some woman in Florida, some article I was reading, it was, as I recall, the person was saying that she's not voting for Trump because he's not hurting the right people. And there's a lot of people who do feel that way, or about his opponents. They're not. They vote because they're going to do something or not do something. Um, but unfortunately, sometimes it's just out of spite. It's like they're going to do this. These people aren't going to get their privileges anymore. I'm hurting them. I do see it more so with the specifically the Trump supporters. Now that's a broad stroke, of course. There's a lot of variety, and a lot of people on the left don't really. They're too influenced by the headlines. Like I see stuff increasingly now that it's sort of election season. I see it increasingly that they're saying, if you vote for this person, you're this, that, the other. To both candidates. In particular, I'm on Quora, so I see more leftists. I would say more left-leaning people. There, it's basically, if you vote for Trump, you're supporting racist, xenophobic, blah blah blah. A whole list. A lot of times it's just spaghetti on the wall. It's not particularly accurate. Some of the insults aren't particularly accurate. Some of them just they're whatever. But people often say um, what the group thinks, and then that's what's called groupthink. It's just regurgitation. In such cases, regardless of what their political opinions are, I'm not interested in what they have to say because, past learning what it is, because it's like pressing a record button of something that's already been recorded. It's like listening to a record player. I know exactly what they're going to say. I even know why they're saying it. They're saying it because um, they're upset over something for the most part, and they think that this makes some kind of difference. Some kind. Is this weird? And I'm not picking on anyone in particular. I've seen this on both sides, by the way. But in particular, I've noticed that right wing people they have certain priorities, certainly, but they mostly want to be return to certain traditional values, and they they tend to be very disparaging of the left, broadly speaking. The left, well, they're a bit meandering. If I were to, hmm, it's a very broad statement. What a leftist is a very very broad statement. So it's not like you can just say Democrats because that doesn't quite fit. There's a lot in the Democrat Party, or with a lot of Democrats, that isn't particularly leftist. And leftist doesn't necessarily mean progressive. That's the other thing that people are mistaken about. But and rightist doesn't necessarily mean a Trump supporter, for example. That's something that people really steamroll over. So there's a lot of nuance to this. At the beginning, I thought, well, I have various opinions about the candidates, but there's a difference between an opinion about a candidate and an opinion about the candidate's supporters. Um, I think, and so all these things, I would say all these things should be taken into account by an educated person. Also, the facts. Now, the facts is not an expansive list that explains everything. There are things that are factual, and there's a lot of opinion, and there's a lot of speculation, and there's a lot of confusion. And yes, there's a lot of opinions, but the facts are mixed in there. That's what confuses people. Because some people, they cannot separate or will not separate their opinion from, like, when they say, here are the facts, and then they say something that's emotionally charged. Well, facts aren't. They're just sort of lists of of things that are verifiably true. They too can be deceiving depending on how they're presented and what context. You can say something that's entirely factually true. For example, um, if someone were to make a video about Hunter x Hunter, and it said Chairman Netero attempts to beat a premature 3-month-old Chimera ant to death with a Guanyin statue. Well, that's entirely true, entirely factual, but it's missing a lot of context. This premature 3-month-old was born being able to speak in full sentences, I'd say, as an adult. It's murderous, wanted to enslave humanity. Um, yeah, a lot of horrible things were going on there that the chairman was trying to prevent. But the title could still be published and still get views, and it could essentially be their fight, let's say, and people might be deceived and they might think something that's, like, let's say they didn't watch the rest of the show. They might think something different than they would have otherwise. That's the way the news is. Now, when I say news, I am speaking colloquially, because the news, it doesn't really. It's like facts. It doesn't really prioritize just telling events as they're happening. It's entertainment, and it is for profit, which means that there's an inherent bias baked in. Um, Bias isn't all bad, but it's essentially things. Things tend towards monopoly unless corrected, but the corrections can be horrifying. So, and that's where we come into free speech laws, for example, or rather, compelled speech or restricting the freedom of speech. Um, it's very important that we not do that. If we label some things hate speech, it's a slippery slope, and people will go down it. Politicians will go down it, and then they will interpret whatever it is that they want to interpret out of that to mean that criticism is hate speech, for example. That means the truth is no longer an absolute defense against libel, slander, which is one of the cornerstones of our justice system, or one of the great planks, I would say. These are things that people don't really take into account when they consume the news too much, I think. And again, it's colloquial. It's more entertainment. If one wants high quality news locally, you just ask around. You'll get high quality news. On a more regional level, depending on why you want it, probably contacts in the news, and then they can navigate you through some of the stories. Other than that, well-informed people who pay attention locally, you connect with them, you can gain a lot of insight into what's really going on and what has been going on and so on. Nationally, well, the thing is, you're probably not going to get the a good story or a good perspective just by looking at the newspapers. You have to dig a bit. Nationally and internationally, it's difficult. You got it can be pieced together, but it's a little bit anecdotal because it's hard to verify things as a private citizen. You can dig as far as the public information will go, and I think that's will paint you a pretty good picture. But again, local is usually the way to go. That's advice I give to anyone about from any country, really, assuming they have access to some technology. I do like commenting on politics, but I consider myself more of a commentator than a writer on the subject. Like I'm in the comment sections talking with people about something or asking questions. That's where you'll find me. You won't find me usually doing a whole blog post about politics. Not because I'm uninterested in the subject, but because most politicians aren't interesting. What they do isn't interesting, even. It's just the same old politics. What they're doing is very predictable. Um, I am somewhat motivated by what interests me, and that does that does lead me to consume certain content and to avoid certain content. Now, I try to be careful about that second one because there was a time when I would avoid too much. I had a fairly narrow outlook on life many years ago, but by temperament and nature, I suppose, I'm very curious. So the answers given weren't sufficient. So my curiosity just, it was basically driving me insane. Like, there was what I thought I was supposed to do, and my curiosity, and the changes that my curiosity led me to, the opportunities, the people I spoke to. Um, well, maybe, yeah. I mean, it's a bumpy road, certainly, but I learned to, um, let's see. Integrity is the most important thing in life. There's nothing that even comes close. No single thing that comes close. Yes, intelligence and certain things give a baseline of ability, but integrity, that is being yourself, that is the most important thing. Now, that doesn't mean just lean into every sort of impulse and that's you. No, not at all. Um, who you are is the default. Um, sometimes sometimes we're upset or something is going on that's changing our lives, but we're not we're not our experiences, we're the sum of our experiences, if that makes sense. And what we choose to do about them. And increasingly, life happens because of our actions, not to us. In other words, there's a lot of things we can't control, but we increasingly choose our settings. It's gradual, not linear, but it definitely happens um, for most people in their life through persistent effort. we choose somewhat our settings as we begin any new endeavor and build our homes, build our families, build our clans, what have you. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Sometimes when we're young, it can be very very frustrating because things aren't happening fast enough. I know I was frustrated to a degree that was, well, it was quite concerning. Looking back, I know there were people who were concerned for me during the years. I suppose high school and a little beyond that, I think. And I certainly didn't have all my ducks in a row even after that. But I was sorting through a lot of things, and I think I spent a lot of my time well. So that's something. But there were a lot of missed opportunities, and I noticed that the more I engage in life up to a degree, because I'm an introvert, I'm not necessarily comfortable being in loud, large parties, basically, or things like that. I'm not much for the club scene, but up to a degree, the more I engage in life, the better. Before that, before that point, it's um, it can be dangerous because introverts can fall into a sort of nest of entropy of non-movement, which can be very unhealthy. That's why I caution people if there's two introverts who are interested in becoming romantic. On the one hand, you feel what you feel, but you don't necessarily have to pursue it. On the other hand, I would be very careful because unless you're both very careful about the social aspect, there's great danger of falling into a nest of entropy, perhaps mutually, perhaps individually, and and as I said, that could be quite dangerous psychologically. What advice would I give to extroverts? Um, hmm. Well, I guess it's sort of more of a minor point. Sometimes introverts don't want to be as social as you want us to be, and we usually know our limits pretty well. Um, on a more important note, um, yeah, but we're definitely grateful that you exist. Um, Even if we're not always very enthusiastic about being um, involved with social things. We are grateful for the invitations, and we do keep we do keep the thought in mind, and we're happy people are thinking about us. Whew. Yeah, I'm starting to look into some of the well, personality basically. So that's an interesting topic. Um, I keep getting different figures, but it's like a quarter of people are introvert and the rest are extrovert. So a lot of things are geared towards people who are extroverted, which is fine, but sometimes it's not like a suitable environment for us. And no, hanging out at the library isn't going to cut it. I mean, it sort of does, but depends on what we're doing. Um, no, anyways. um, hmm. cat sleeping on the table. Or no, he's awake. Hmm. He hasn't joined us yet. Cats have their own social calendar. I wouldn't say they're exactly introverts or extroverts. But they are solitary creatures, which doesn't really apply to either. Some are more extroverted, some are more introverted. I think it's probably a more even distribution than with humans. Just something I've noticed. I'm not exactly sure why people are wired one way or the other. I mean, it's not genetics and such, but I mean, on an evolutionary level, why did we develop this way? Um, the other thing about introverts, we may get along really well with one another, but sometimes we don't find one another. And it's surprising where we find people. I just went to the Renaissance Fair. That's where I got my sunburn. But yeah, I've met some people there that I would like to see again. I love the craftsmanship, um, the overall aesthetic. I'll probably Yeah, I'll probably visit next week. I may make a video about it. I didn't film anything there, this visit, but I probably will next time. I'm not one of those YouTubers who thinks everything needs to be a video. Um, and I will try to make longer videos with other people. Um, no, anyways. I'm looking forward to work tomorrow. Um, and that's another thing. I'm looking forward to work more and more as time goes on, not less. Like, I don't feel like it's a grind. I mean, sometimes it is, but I don't. I look forward to helping customers, especially. Um, I do like helping people. I always have. I like the moving meditation that is most of my job, whether I'm bagging groceries or returning carts or helping out in maintenance in different ways. So that can be fun. It's really good exercise. I've gotten into better shape since going since starting work. Lost a little weight. I'm on a weight loss journey, but it's going it's going at its own pace. Yeah, I remember my sunblock too. And next week, even if the clouds are out, I got to remember my sunblock because mm, I don't know, half an hour more. I might have had some. I might have had some sun poisoning or been in the area where sun poisoning could happen. I'm mostly Italian, um, but I have Latvian or Estonian and Irish, and those two just I burn. I don't tan at all, not one little bit. My brothers tan a little bit. They got more of the Italian genes, I suppose, but not me. Love Italian food and culture. Uh, but yeah, it's one of those drawbacks. And for a long time, I thought I was German, or we all did. We thought we were German because my grandmother said she was, but we think that maybe Um, Maybe she was from Latvia or Estonia or that area, and maybe she was adopted or something. We're not sure. But anyways, it's I'd love to explore that someday. But I want to do it when I can do it properly, not this ancestry or something. We already looked into ancestry a bit, and yeah, I want to do a an origin to or what's it called? Heritage, yeah, heritage tour. So that would be visiting Ireland, Latvia, or Estonia, and Italy. In my particular case, now we do have some more distant ancestry. I think what was it? I think Jake, my older brother, I think he mentioned that somewhere way back we have a little bit of African, so like who knows how much percent. Um, and yeah, so I definitely want to look into all of that, but it's nice. Now, part of it would be cultural. Part of it would be perhaps visiting family hometowns from my ancestors. Part of it would be food. It's almost always food is a component of my travel. That's why I made that page recommended local businesses. In fact, it's it is about businesses, but it's almost exclusively about food, about restaurants and cafes. Um, and I don't, I don't have any chains. I don't review them. I view them usually as a blight upon the community, culinary wise, anyways. So it's kind of they're kind of like duds. Um, Now, there's certain places that I may eat at occasionally, but they're not really. The food tastes the same each time, and that's not a good thing. Great cooks, or even good ones, they have variety. They don't necessarily make the same thing the same way. Um, a lot of times, there's multiple ways to make a dish or a particular food item, even. So there's a lot of combinations that can be used um, that can contribute to variety. Variety is the spice of life. It's also the soul of food. I hate soulless food. It's like some of those pre-made package pancake mixes, for example. They're fine. If you follow the recipe, they make an adequate pancake, but each one tastes the same. What are you gonna do? Add more butter or something? No. Me, I would add spices. But if you just use what the package says to do, each one will taste the same. IHOP is a good example in particular of that. Now, I don't have a problem with them, but I don't particularly enjoy necessarily their lack of variety, and that goes with any restaurant you can name, any chain restaurant, even ones that I really like Five Guys. Um, I don't know. Anyways, that's why I don't name them. That's why I don't. I don't review them basically, even if I like them. Like I might check in, and I might leave a review, but not as recommended local businesses. So that's the way I look at it. Whew. Mm, nice. Oh, my pets are doing well. Xanatos. I'm not sure he's getting enough sunlight. I worry about him a little because he's cold blooded, and we're not sure if. Yeah, blame my metacognition. Yeah, I think Kathy was the first one at Explorations to sort of point that out to me. Like, I have a high degree of metacognition, because that's yeah, I'll definitely do that. Um, yeah, I mean, it's an attribute of being an introvert somewhat, and I don't know. I've always enjoyed reading things in book format or otherwise, and then sort of explaining about them a little bit. Nice. Yeah, I saw her last month, by the way. Yeah, so meeting with her group, and it's good catching up. My work's giving me a little bit more hours. Hopefully, they'll give me more days to work. Um, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, it's basically I can walk around town, but sometimes there's a relative lack of money, so it's like going out and splurging is hard. Uh, but if I budget carefully, which I do, I'm able to go to a nice restaurant. Like, I go to Sasso's every Thursday for jazz night, and I'll get something, um, and it's really good food. I reviewed them with recommended local businesses. Oh, I hope you feel better. I am thinking about you, and I wish there was a lot more I could do. Yeah, make sure that you get the rest you need, and attend to your nutrition. I know for me, it's easy to like forget to eat when I'm stressed, but yeah, you got a lot of people in your corner, you know. I don't know if it compares at all, but I have had migraines previously in previous years, and they definitely hurt, and it's I know, um, yeah, I don't know if it compares, but yeah, whew, yeah, migraines are not fun. Cluster headaches, I never had those, thankfully, and I don't think I've had any. I've just had bumps and bruises basically, but they're um, I've had basically ordinary headaches. So I definitely sympathize and to some degree empathize with people who have had more severe types of headaches or head injuries. Well, I try to empathize, let's say, but I definitely sympathize. Yeah, it's really surprising. It's surprising the long-term impacts that people have on one another. It's um, yeah, a lot of people describe it in different terms, but it's what gives life its meaning. It's to sort of be conscientious of the impact we have on others. So, at least that's been my perspective. The more self-aware someone is, it's not that they're necessarily at an advantage, because there are things like decision paralysis, but in general, self-awareness is good, and less self-awareness is not as good. And it's important also on that knife edge to um, avoid things like nihilism. If someone believes that they've got a lot of things figured out and therefore life is deterministic ish, therefore everything's sort of going to play out the way it's going to, therefore, well, people can go down some very, very dark paths in that. But surprises are something that make life non-deterministic. So no matter what someone's intelligence, um, they don't have it all figured out, and they can be surprised. I remember I was going through that when I was going through my THC ordeal a couple of years ago. It's like intellectually I knew a lot of this stuff, but I had to go through it on a visceral, emotional level, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible. The experience, I mean, the knowledge I gained from it, yeah, that was really good. I haven't had a panic attack since after that month. Yeah, then the Zoloft. It had largely the same symptoms. Mm, Basically, it really screwed me up also, but it's okay because it's just it's a medication. It works very well for some people, and for others, it doesn't do anything much. And then for others, it's really bad. And I happen to be one of them. Same thing with Prozac. That one really threw me through a loop. Oof. Somewhere in high school. I'm not exactly sure what the time was, but yeah, that was my second bout of clinical depression. Yeah, that wasn't fun. Clinical depression is not fun. And the demotivating factor of depression is what makes it so hard to treat. Because you think about it, demotivation to get help, to acknowledge a problem, to just mm, do stuff. I mean, usually depressed people do some things, but it's in the pattern of depression. It's usually a little more reactionary or oh. No, depression is not a good thing to have, but it's physiological. So is panic, by the way, anxiety. It's primarily physiological. There's some psychological, and obviously, if people are taking a psychoactive substance, that can help or hinder, as the case may be. Ironically, I was taking the THC for anxiety that I was having at the time. Uh, um, so that was interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, Probably under medical supervision, I will look into different medications that may help, especially in a small dose. Um, Without naming names, it probably won't be marijuana, but it'll be something else. But yeah, there's some things that I've read about and heard about that I think are worth looking into, and certainly asking a medical professional about. Um, it's important to keep an open mind in life. That's something that I've noticed. It's really vital, and people kind of take it for granted, but it's actually really hard to do. There's a quote. Um, I don't know if Richard Feynman said it, but I saw it on the internet. Um, the first principle is not to fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. That's a really hard lesson because you got a built-in ego, and you have a built-in bias towards for yourself. Usually, and it's really easy to overlook things, um, or to assume that things are going to turn out better just because you're involved. That's not necessarily going to happen. It's actually not going to affect the outcome. Um, your performance will. So whatever it takes to make a proper performance, I suggest you do that. It's like writing. I can't really think of a principle except maybe coherency. Some part of the story has to be coherent, even if one character or multiple characters are being incoherent, or at least they appear so at first. That's okay. But letting some authors write for the characters, I think, and some write for the audience, some write to make money. Okay, so the last one, you're probably not going to make money as a writer. So I suggest you pick one of the other two, um, because writing is a passion thing. Some people write for one person, like a child perhaps, or one of their children. They write a story. I think Tolkien did that. In fact, it was for Christopher, his son, and the world's very thankful for it. Um, Extraordinary man. I very much admire his work and enjoy it. Um, so I suggest it's probably best if it's one or the other. You might make money, probably not though. Um, Write for the characters. Now, that's another way of saying write because it's a personal interest. The story itself is a personal interest to you, and the characters are living concepts. Well, they have their own lives, and you build them, you flesh them out. Maybe they're based off a person, and that way you can, go whole cloth more or less. Change the names a little, but oh, there's so many people who I've met who are extraordinarily good people. I I don't know. For writing, I would say I definitely want to create characters with them as the basis. The good characters, or eccentric, as the case may be, or both. Um, Now, evil is more generic. I don't get to know evil people, and I've met a few. They're not worth getting to know. Um, for Because of their character flaws. but evil is beyond character flaws. Um, Good is defined as the absence of evil, not the other way around. Because evil is a character. Actually, this is actually a little more complicated. Evil is associated with essentially laziness and not doing things, or doing the easy thing, like malice, for example, or acting out of malice. Destruction is easy. Sometimes, well, anyways, that's the way I see it. Um, because someone could act in a very poor way and do a lot of destruction, and they're not necessarily a bad person, but what they've done is really, really bad. And destruction is usually the thing that it's the opposite of creation. Creation is beauty. It's everything around us. But well, anyways, in my story that I'm writing, um, it's going to be a book series, fantasy. Well, technically fantasy. I would say it would have a lot of realism to it, but there's a fantasy element. Like some places are low mana cycle, so that they or no mana at all, like no magic, like here on Earth, let's say. Um, and then some are higher mana cycle. And what that means is it's how much people can use magic. And in some cases, if it's actually high enough, people can't use magic. Otherwise, they would get um, that attract monsters, basically. But yeah, it's an interesting series, I think, because on the one hand, it is so mind-bogglingly complex that a human can't possibly write it, because there's um, it's basically the amount of universes in this metaverse, if you will, might as well be infinite. However, the point of view that is the points of view that are being explored are from characters that are on the ground for the most part, or talking about things of cosmic proportions. This speculation about the nature of the cosmos, this speculation about um, whatever it is that goes on in the story. The way I see it is that most of it will be about the hunters, and they're not exactly Earth centric, but they're there's a lot of places that people can exist, or organisms can exist that don't look like Earth. Is the Fey realm. That's one of the major themes, by the way. There's heaven, hell, the Fey realm, the dragons, um, the aliens, and then there's Earth, or Earth analog. So there's basically 6 story types, um, where, as far as characters that we primarily concern ourselves with, um, are living. So there would be, I can see it being that there would be several books for each one of these categories I speak of. Hi, Omega. Oh, wet nose. You have a wet nose. Of course, I have a dry nose, so it's not a criticism. Not at all. He likes headbutting. So do I, actually. Humans don't really do it as routine bonding. We usually are a little more verbal, I think. It's not a criticism. I like you the way you are. You're a cat. You are not a human. I'm not a cat. uh, he Omega has been such a blessing to me. Um, actually, I don't want him to push any buttons and end the stream prematurely. He's purring. Cat purrs may have healing properties, or they may help humans to sort of heal themselves as they can. A lot of times cats aren't trying to be adorable, by the way. They're just being themselves, which is incredibly charming. Whew. Cat hugs are good. They, I don't know, they do something for the soul, maybe. All right, we're in the final 3 minutes. So, um, Megan's eating the leftovers of my dinner, well, licking the plate clean more. Cats are definitely scavengers, but they appreciate, I think, food being prepared for them. I don't think they regard us as their servants. I think they regard us as weird cats, very very strange cats. Or well, I'm not sure they have a concept of cat exactly, but eh, they think we're strange. They don't understand why we don't do as they do, or why they don't understand what it is that they're saying. Yeah, getting out of the house is not enough for me. I have to. I want to engage with people. In general, when I actually socialize with people, that's when I have a better day. Otherwise, it's it's a bit dicier. Let's say I could. There's a temptation to self isolate. I think with introverts, and I resist that nowadays. And online activities is not enough. That's another temptation. It's like, oh well, I'm not isolating. Well, you are actually, but I'm engaging with people. Well, yes, but it's not enough. That's what I advise people. Usually online, it's not enough. Even if I don't know. I think it's important to not despair of the youth. I mean, even if they're not doing what we think they should, um, the youth the youth create the new things. So mentoring is important, but don't don't try to domineer. Don't be domineering towards them. Uh, sometimes sometimes there may be something where it's pretty clear that some corrections needed, but mostly it offer them perspective, offer them um, mentorship, um, and realize that they're not going to do things your way exactly, but they have their own challenges to face as well. And yeah, I would say that's the advice I would give to people of um, people who have some who have more experience. And when I say youth, I mean people from perhaps their teens to mm, late 20s. Um, youth is until the brain stops developing or finishes developing rather. um, then one enters into a different stage of adulthood. Now, adulthood does not start at 18 necessarily. There's some people who are perfectly mature years before that. So, and that's speaking colloquially, it doesn't begin um, at any specific time, but generally speaking, adulthood is when one takes responsibility for their own life. That's a matter of degrees. That's, well, a matter of degrees. um, and so every situation is different. Mm. But adulthood has its own cycle. There's usually yeah, it's usually from whenever it is someone takes responsibility organically for their own life to um, probably the late 20s, and then biologically they have reached a different place in life. Beyond that point, other challenges and opportunities arise. I've noticed that with people. Um, well, there's sometimes people get very very disappointed with, let's say, 18-year-olds or people who are in their 20s, saying they're not acting their age, they're acting immature. Why do they say that? What are they doing? They're violating botanical values. That's what they're doing. That's why they're angry. And usually these people who are making those complaints are well, very narrow-minded and unpleasant. Let's put it that way. No, youth can certainly make mistakes, but there's a difference between mistakes and regrets. So yeah, it might underutilize time. So what? I've underutilized. Almost everyone's underutilized time. No, we learn to be conscientious. We learn to be present. The more we are present, the more we revel in our experiences, whatever it is that they are. It could be eating. It could be meditating. It could be running or traveling. Anything at all, as long as we're conscious. We should. I think it's advisable to try to be conscientious in almost all situations. And then, yeah. Well, anyways, wrapping things up. Um, don't despair of the youth. They will grow up, most of them, and they'll probably have some of the same concerns that you have with youngsters, and they'll handle them their own way, but they'll handle them differently based off of how they are mentored. It's very important to mentor the youth, and it's very important to accept mentorship. Now, be selective about it. Don't just accept mentorship from someone because they're older than you, or even because they have a lot more experience than you. There's predators, there's nasty people of one variety or another. There's ideologues. There's just people who just are toxic, and sometimes one has to be distant with them, like, accept listen to their advice, but it's like, well, on the one hand, how's that working out for you? On the other hand, okay, it's your perspective, but you know, anyways. And then there's a lot of people who have learned and who have improved themselves over time, and they have some nuggets of wisdom to share, and got to be open to that too. And sometimes they're not even all that pleasant people, but mm, unpleasant doesn't necessarily mean toxic. That's something that I think society in general should learn. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things to think about regarding how people interact with one another, what people can learn from. It's important to treat people as humans before anything else. Before politics, before family, before friendship, even or friends groups. It's important to resist groupthink. It's kind of easy to do so. It's kind of easy to engage in groupthink, so it's important to resist. Resistance shows character because there's a lot of temptations, a lot of things that are easy. Easy isn't necessarily bad, but it usually is. It usually leads to at least narrow ends, um, but not always. Now, usually the harder things are worthwhile. Might take a little work, might take a lot of work, it might take a lot more than a little collaboration, but they're the things that are worthwhile, in my experience. But, anyways, I wanted to wish everyone a good night. I wish that everyone has a good night.